Buenas tardes, buenos días también para la parte de América Latina.
Good afternoon to all of you. Hello, good afternoon, colleagues from Spain, Latin America, and anywhere else in the world. Today, we celebrate the third edition of the International Conference on Gender, Violence and Health. Today is our second session, and just let me remind you that yesterday we had the chance of listening to Alicia Reyero, who spoke to us about how the collective imaginary is constructed from the misused, stereotyped image of women. Also, Ima Sanchis, the journalist, who as an interviewer of long-standing spoke to us about the survivors and resilient women of the barbarities that we find all over the world. Afterwards, we listened to Alicia Oliver Royo, who explained that the media have certainly advanced in terms of the visibility of male violence, but they still need to work on the treatment of their news, which is fundamental. And finally, Gemma Ruiz Palà from TV3, sorry, the Catalan TV, who spoke to us about the decalogue on the gender perspective in the news content of the main Catalan television station, and how themselves have been advancing and improving in this sense. We were lucky also to enjoy the poems written and recited by Ainara Garcia, a promising young woman with a lot of talent. Today, only before we get started, I'd like to remind you just a few technical issues regarding with the proper functioning of today's session. First of all, we have simultaneous interpreting available. This is the globe icon that you can see on the bottom right-hand side of your screen or your either laptop or smartphone, which will enable you to listen to either the interpreters working into English or Spanish. Throughout the session, you can send us any comments, queries, questions, anything you would like to share with us. We will have a Q&A session at the very end, and we will try to answer to all of you. So whenever you have anything you'd like to mention, don't wait till the very end. Just send your comments anytime you wish. And finally, here you have our email address where you can send us anything that you consider interesting related to these sessions. Right, today we have a very international day. We have Mr. Ivan Zainos with us, the International Relations Coordinator of Medicus Mundi Mediterranea, and Jordi Cortés, who's a Technical Project Manager of the Directorate of Global Justice and International Cooperation of Barcelona's City Council. Okay, guys, you have the floor. Good afternoon to all of you who are watching and listening us via the network. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you for the Catalan Agency of Cooperation for Development who were here yesterday with us, and also Barcelona's City Council, the Barcelona Institute, Women's Institute, and all delegations that, as we know, are online: Mozambique, Ecuador, Bosnia, and some other countries who will be participating today. I shall briefly introduce some ideas that I will show you in this PowerPoint before Jordi also participates, and I hope at the end of this session we will enjoy a fruitful debate. My suggestion today, as its title indicates, is the international cooperation and its importance in eradicating violence by men. We could even go further and talk about the promotion of women's rights, generally speaking. When I was writing and preparing this presentation, the first question that came to my mind was, what does truly give us, or actually what sort of burdens does it cause or generate international cooperation towards the fight against male violence? we, as Medicus Mundi, we have been working long time in many different countries, and of course we've experienced most positive experiences, but some negative ones too. So I believe it's really healthy in our sector to be self-critical and to open about it, to talk about it openly. And the next question that came to my mind is that if truly exists some sort of differential fact in the sector, in these women's rights promotion activities, or for example, in environmental justice interventions or health rights projects or some other sectors where we work. After thinking about it, truly, I don't think there are all that many differences. So I believe the analysis I can offer you can be applied to either this or other sectors. So I think it's worth rethinking about it all. Maybe the most important aspect is that at the moment, since the place where we work, mainly Catalonia, thankfully, public cooperation policies from great donors such as the Catalan Agency or Barcelona's City Council and other local administrations are really sensitive towards this topic, promoting women's rights and the eradication of violence. So it's great to sort of work together towards the same goal. What sort of positive nature can we define in this sense? Well, a major point, and maybe which doesn't exist in other sectors, but it does in development cooperation, is the potentiality, the capability of creating synergies, forging alliances, and getting started with different movements and projects. For example, these sessions, it's our third edition already. You can see some photos from colleagues from Maputo, Bosnia, Bolivia, Ecuador, and thanks to the projects that we have been implementing from these policies in Barcelona, originally created in Barcelona, we have been able to establish all these links. So this is indeed very positive. The second item I'd like to highlight is at the international level is the fights and battles we are defending. There is a powerful visibilization. We are making visible all these issues, and this is very powerful. Another element we could mention are the exchange of knowledge and technical support. And it's a bilateral exchange, actually, between mainly cities. It's true that in Barcelona, we can give or share a model with an international recognition, which we've used several times as a reference when it comes to caring for women victims. We've used this protocol with colleagues from Bosnia, Mozambique, Ecuador, who have been welcome to come here and have a look, see how we've been working. And another one which is vital is what sort of funds can we mobilize and how we can implement projects for house care, care centers for victims and insertion projects into the labor market, etc. So all these elements are quite differential from other sectors like the health one, the environmental one, etc. What could we pinpoint as negative, or what sort of challenges do we face? Well, I believe that the elements or tools that we work with sometimes are short-sighted or too little, in the sense that with other institutions, we can work throughout 1 year, which is too short in time. It doesn't allow us to intervene at the long run. If we're not lucky enough to write down these projects and organize them and get the necessary funds to work beyond that first year. So this fact actually is an obstacle to think about long-term strategies. And this fact, the fact we cannot have funds over more than 1 year is a problem, because we need to be able to predict, to establish this long-term horizon. It's not only the time and the tools, sometimes we also face a lack of financial resources to be able to create structural changes. For example, our colleagues in Mozambique, in Maputo, are online. We will listen to them afterwards. Our experience says that in their country, there are no foster care or homes for victims of violence. So imagine if we want to launch some sort of initiative so that the government afterwards can observe, can carry on. This needs a lot of funds, and it's an issue. If we add the fact that we're talking about short-sighted or short projects that sometimes end after a year and that they need further financial funds, we also need to add the fact that we need to develop multi-sector projects. This is quite common, and it's a twofold coin, because with little resources, sometimes when we try to implement these projects, the efficiency is not as good as we would like to. And finally, two factors that they might be symbolic, but sometimes when we work with institutions, local institutions, of course, searching for funds as it's normal, they end up copying some sort of terminology, language. They sort of learn this jargon that makes the discourse homogeneous, but it's actually very diverse. When we're talking about women's rights, realities in Africa, Latin America, or Europe are totally different. And the rhythms of these implementations are not identical in northern cities like Barcelona. So this is briefly the analysis I'd like to expose, and I believe leaving these open questions might be interesting for the debate afterwards. And I launch an appeal for different institutions and donors so that we can improve these tools and these specifically financial resource perspectives so that we can work in the longer run. Well, this is all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ivan. We continue with Jordi. You have the floor. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. He's saluting everyone in different languages. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Medicos Mundi. I believe these are the third congress that we've organized in Barcelona. I believe that since the very beginning, we've always been participating, we've been present, because I'll let you know, I believe that for all of us, but especially for the community of Barcelona, this issue, and not only the fight against any form of violence, but as Ivan mentioned, this common effort of women's rights, it's not only that it's correct, that it's the way it should be, and it should have been for a long time. And also, as Ivan mentioned, I will tell you a little bit about the role that Barcelona has played, the sort of added value that we've given, not only from Barcelona City Council, but also from at grassroots level with the city's society. Our work reflects this added value that I mentioned, and also the existence of this consensus, of this common mentality when it comes to working hand by hand, not only with the city council, but other local institutions. We have an international mobility programs between some of our members, some of our staff, and this consensus, as I mentioned, can always help us generate our own models, because Barcelona City Council has been working hard against any forms of violence by men, and this will help other institutions copy our good practices, basically. Now, quickly, I've been working for 20 years at Barcelona City Council, and since the very beginning when I started, all gender issues at the beginning were a common point in all sort of proposals, and it didn't really have much weight. Now, thankfully, we have a director plan which says that gender violence and gender justice, rather, is together with the economic justice, environmental justice, and the right of refuge or migration are one of the four main axes. We have a specific clause in all the proposals and all the calls that we open from the City Council. And this is one of the most important topics. It's not more important than the other ones, but we always focus on making sure that any projects that we approve focus on these issues. Recently, we have devoted through our program call more and more resources specifically for projects which work on defending women's rights and eradicating gender violence. I'd also like to mention about the added value. As Ivan also mentioned, sometimes the model, I don't like to talk about models, rather experience of Barcelona, how we have put into practice this protocol to fight against gender violence. It's really wonderful because it proves that there is an actual will from the politics for these policies to be common, to be a priority, so that we actually have plenty of knowledge and resources available. Another important point is that Barcelona's experience has been built on a great level of the civil society participation, which have been organized and working around these topics. We are talking about the fight against violence by men, but also any other issues related with women's rights. Barcelona, not only when creating, defining new policies, during the decision-making process, it's always been participatory, sorry, as I mentioned, together with policymakers that they have been democratically chosen. But as I say, not only during this co-creation of new policies, but also the management. For example, civil society, associations, many of them from our city are actually managing this protocol of caring and helping women victims of violence by men. So sometimes from different administrations, we can see this as a huge challenge when it comes to time, resources, staff. And what we believe is that it's true that we do need these resources, but this well-organized civil society, for example, working in Bosnia, where we have the Segura network, the Xarxa Segura, in Barcelona, it happens the same. There's plenty of people working hand by hand to actually offer these foster care homes for women victims. So not only the city council is working on it, as I say, it's vital to have a great civil society actually building up all these blocks towards the same goal, we would have never been able to reach the position we're in at the moment without this solid network that have signed all these collaboration agreements, which is supporting this greater system. In my opinion, this is a great value. So I want to transmit this message when we work directly together with the county council, municipalities, or any other local councils in Sarajevo, in Maputo, etc. They can see this model, they can see this experience. Models, there are many, of course, and they all can be improved. But probably ours can also be improved. We're working hard on it, but at least they might see the civil society as your ally, as an important element of your policy, not as an obstacle, not as a problem. On the contrary. Well, I don't want to talk too much. Finally, for example, we have the FIDEO, a network in the States. There are several cities participating together with Barcelona, where we have created this knowledge network on topics like women's rights and the fight towards equality, where we work several aspects. What we do is to share some mechanisms, resources, tools, and know-how. And at the end of the day is this great knowledge transfer, this face-to-face, one-to-one, and it works great, you know. This network is growing and growing, so we wanted to actually spread around some other areas. We're working at an institutional level at the moment. We have another example in Sarajevo, and the work we're implementing at the moment with the Council of Sarajevo and the Civil Society of Bosnia, specifically to look for this model, walk along with them, and making sure that the Sarajevo Council, or county rather, can actually implement all these new policies, and making sure that the civil society can be part of that mechanism. I think Medicos Mundi has done an amazing work both in Sarajevo and in Bosnia, and complementing that effort at the institutional level, we are sharing this work with Bosnian institutions. It's not sort of activism. We're colleagues, you know, we talk about what we've done. And I believe that from our side as a local institution, I think it's very important that we can share all these examples, and we can give this form of help. We're also doing a similar thing in Libya. We've talked with the UN, we've developed new ideas like web docs, etc. So we want to keep complementing the task done by the social society, being such an important part of the equation. We are, as I say, more of the public policy and institutional level. Well, I'll leave it here because I've taken a few extra minutes. So we have some questions already, but I believe it's worth to continue with our agenda. And afterwards, when we open the Q&A session, as we will have more queries and questions, it's worth sharing and debating, all of us. So we will now listen. It's a tiny break between this introduction. Yesterday we had the pleasure of listening to Ainara Garcia's poems, and today we have a great guitarist with us. I will introduce him. Now he's getting ready. He is Stephen Marchionda. I hope I pronounce his family name properly, Marchionda. who's established himself on the international music scene as a performer capable of combining the expressiveness and richness of color inherited from the past with the distinction, imagination, and academic rigor of modern technique. Stephen is a graduate of the Yale School of Music and the Royal Academy of Music in London. He's given successful performances at London's Wigmore Hall and Carnegie Hall in New York. He's been invited to perform at festivals and concerts, including the Kennedy Center, Frick Collection, Aspen, and Cheltenham. He's also performed at Lincoln Center, Trinity Church, and St. Paul Church in New York, among many other venues. So as you can see, we have the great luck of having amongst us today a true international artist. So we are also an international Congress. So Stephen, it'll be a pleasure listening to you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to play Enrique Granados, Danzas Españolas, número 5, number 5.
La primera será realizada por Borka Rudic, miembro del Consejo General de la Federación.
The first presentation will be given by Borka Rudic, member of the General Council of the International Federations of Journalists and General Secretary of the Association of Journalists of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who will be talking to us about the role of journalists in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the treatment of information on gender violence. So please make sure you have unmuted yourself and activated your video.
Yes, I do.
Sí, sí, lo he hecho.
Hello.
Hola.
Did you hear me?
Yes.
Did you hear me?
Sí, yes, sí.
It's okay. Hello to everybody from Sarajevo. Many greetings for all of you at the conference. Special pozdrav to Ivan and Milanka from Association of BA Journalists. I am Secretary General of Association BA Journalists. Milanka explained my position in International Federation of the Journalists, and I am very pleased to be here today and talk about our challenges and activities related to the improved media approach and to present gender-based violence through the media content in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the region Western Balkans. I prepared a presentation for you, and I would like to start with my personal experience from last few days. I was attacked by some people from Facebook, social networks, and some online media. Can I see my presentation? I didn't see at the screen. No, it isn't my presentation. When you're waiting for my presentation, I would like to start with my experience and my, yes, it's my presentation. Yes, just let's go. Few days ago, I received a message from one man, very active on the Facebook. He has 4 or 6 profiles on the Facebook, and he wrote his dream, and he wrote, I dreamed of looking at one big screen. I was interrupted by the black snakes, hundreds of them. I cut off their heads and precede them with some weapons. Borka Rudic is one of these from my dream. It is one of more messages, hate speech, death threats, which I received in my career as a journalist and in the position of Secretary General of Association BH Journalists. You can see my colleagues from media community. They are women and they are journalists, female journalists, and all the time they were victim on different kind gender-based violence. I think that's very important that I explain that Bosnia and Herzegovina is traditional society, and the position of the women isn't equal as a man position, and gender-based violence is the big problem for my association for our media and journalist community, and also for my colleagues, female colleagues, to recognize threats and violence to them as a gender-based violence. When we started to talk with Medicus Mundi to create our common project, key challenges for me and my colleagues in association was, why do the media and journalists as human rights defenders and advocates in Bosnia and Herzegovina society violated the rights of female victims through media content and unprofessional reporting? My questions for us was, where can we do better and how? Our approach was that we must be more honest, more human, objective, and comprehensive reporting. We need comprehensive reporting about gender-based violence. Secondly, we must make more personal solidarity with the victim of gender-based violence. Our main ethical principle was the journalist, special female journalist, must be on the side of the victim, especially of the victim of gender-based violence. Also, we tried to changing editorial policies to the interest of the victim. We have a lot of projects related to the human rights, female rights, and so on. But we must to change editorial policies and value of editorial policies to be all the time on the side of the female victim and to work to the interest of them. Also, finally, we try to change environment. We must to decrease stereotypes, sexual harassment, and other forms of violence, female rights through the media content. We started with our project. You can see the title of our project. In February 2020, my association, Be a Journalist, is the biggest association. It's an umbrella association of the journalists and other media professionals in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And our cooperation with Medicus Mundi was with the focus to contribute more professional reporting and advocate against gender-based violence in Sarajevo canton. We had three main goals: improving knowledge of the skills of journalists, editors, bloggers, young journalists, students of journalism, and students in secondary school about gender-based violence in order to provide high professional quality of the media content and social networks, posts or comments. Secondly, we promote of reporting based on the human rights, analytical approach, and the wider conceptualization of the gender-based violence. All the time in Bosnia public, we talk about violence. As you know, we passed a very bad war in 2 decades, but the public and the media in Bosnia and Herzegovina are focused only to the victim of the war. Domestic violence and violence, gender-based violence, are on margin of the interest of the media and public and civil society organization as well. And finally, we try to improve of editorial policy which will place reporting on violence against women and girls in its own editorial value, strategy through the media on daily basis. Finally, we try to establish triangle cooperation among media and journalists on the one side, second side, civil society organization, and the third side, for institutions we reserve. In triangle of our activity, we can create common approach to decrease violence of rights women and others through the media content who were the victim of gender-based violence. There are some our achievements, some results. We empowered 37 journalists from all parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina and improved their skills and knowledge about objective, professional, and ethical reporting on violence against women and girls. Also, we prepared a sign agreement with the Agency for Gender Equality on the state level in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we have aimed to more efficient cooperate with agency to prevent gender-based violence. Also, as a professional association of the journalists, we adopt the guidelines of the International Federation of the Journalists and put them in Bosnia and Herzegovina context. We apply these standards, but we change a little bit them because we have more useful professional principles which can be applied in Bosnia and Herzegovina context. Also, we developed very good, very useful and very professional cooperation with the Foundation of Local Democracy in Sarajevo, and they prepared for us analysis of requirements of the relevant services related to the gender violence in Sarajevo 2020, and also we present that analyze before the Sarajevo Canton institutions, all institutions, civil society organization, cantonal governments and police structure, Ministry for Labor Rights, Ministry for Refugees, for Health, etc., etc. Also, we have had very good cooperation with the Faculty of Journalism in Bosnia, especially with the faculty in Sarajevo, and we educate 94 students from high school and some of them from faculty in order to recognize violence against women and girls in their classroom. It's the first time that one association of the journalists went to the secondary school and discussed with the professors and students and prepared them to be active advocates for the more respect their colleagues in the classroom, girls and other gender in a secondary school. And finally, we some of students from the schools prepared videos about some examples on gender-based violence in secondary school, and we awarded to the best video about gender-based violence in secondary schools in Sarajevo Canton. We gained very good presentation and promotions our activities through the social networks. BA Journalists has the channel on YouTube, Instagram profiles, Twitter profiles, and profiles on the Facebook, and we have a lot of visitors, and you can see the numbers. We organize some public campaign through the social networks and through the media outlets. You can see on the slide that we published 10 articles in online media, news portals, the famous portals in Sarajevo Canton and whole Bosnia and Herzegovina. Also, we prepared 5 media comments in daily newspaper, publish and record and publish 2 TV shows, 3 radio programs, 20 infographics, and 13 videos on social networks. It was the great results for us. I hope that our colleagues from Medicus Mundi are satisfied. We are very pleased with cooperation with them, but also we are satisfied that we establish very specific methodology to cooperate among media, journalists, civil society organization, and public institutions. And also we improve our own capacity to be the best advocate of the rights, interests, and needs of victims of gender-based violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Sarajevo especially, and also we have planned to spread our project and our activity through the Western Balkan countries. I prepared to you some examples that about our capacities to be more focused for the gender-based violence in journalism, in media content, and Bosnian society. We established female journalist network in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and at the moment we have 170 members of female journalist networks. Also, we are each year the part of global campaign Media for Women, launched by the Free Press Unlimited from Amsterdam, and each year BH Journalists for Free organized campaign in the period from 1st to 15 March. Many journalists from Bosnia and Herzegovina join us to that campaign, and we have the network of our colleagues, men and female journalists in Bosnia. Around 40 our members are part of our media campaign, Media for the Women. Also, we are organized Journalism Academy as a special kind of uninstitutional education of the journalists, students of journalism, and editors in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And last year we organized a Journalism Academy with 15 participants, and the topic was the hate speech and journalists' tools to combine and decrease hate speech in the public space. Also, we conduct a lot of survey and research related to the protecting female rights of our female members, female journalists in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also protecting female rights to through the media content. Finally, we organized the prize for the students and young journalists from the media outlets who fight with hate speech for the better way. And also we organized some events during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina. At the moment, we are preparing some activities in that period of 16 days of activism. And finally, slides, and BH Journalists has the award called Champion of Gender Equality. The champion for this year was Radio Sarajevo portal, the famous portal in Sarajevo, very focused on the human rights of the women, and also our colleagues from Banja Luka, Vanja Stokic from the portal e-Trafika, who win the award as a journalist. Thank you very much. It's my presentation, and I am to your disposal for questions or comments.
Thank you, Borka. Hvala, Borka. Al final de todas las ponencias hemos reservado
At
un
the
espacio.
end of each presentation, we have reserved some moments to answer questions, doubts, or hear suggestions. And I want to insist, once again, I want to encourage everyone listening to us that not to be shy and to send their comments, to ask their questions. That way we can have a debate. I think we finished a bit early, but this doesn't mean that our next participant cannot begin. Dr. Eduardo Namburete, director and founder, professor of the School of Communication and Arts of the European University, of the Eduardo Mandengele University, and he is a member of the Assembly of Mozambique. So, Eduardo, I give you the floor.
Vídeo, bien, ya te estamos viendo.
Okay.
Ok, y escuchando bien. Ok, ok, adelante.
Perfect. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. As Milanka said, my name is Eduardo Namburete. I'm a citizen of Mozambique. I want to appreciate the invitation from Medical Mundi to join this very important conference and discuss about the media and gender-based violence. What I'm bringing to this conference, to this Congress, is the experience of Africa, the status of the gender and the media in Africa. So what I will be discussing with you is how the
Sí, un momentito, parece ser que se ha congelado la señal, la voz de... vamos a intentar resolverlo. Un segundo, por
The
favor.
organizers are saying that we have some technical issues. We're going to try to solve the matter and we'll be back with you. Eduardo, if you can hear me, could you please log in again and try to solve this problem? Well, working live, you know, these sort of things happen, especially with Zoom these days. Please bear with me just for a few seconds. Thank you.
Bueno, vamos a esperar unos segundos a ver si Eduardo...
Right, let's still wait for a few seconds to see whether Eduardo can still connect. He's told us that his connection, his internet connection was unstable. So fingers crossed he can get connected. Oh, here we go. Excellent. Here's Eduardo. We might enjoy a second musical pause while Eduardo can recover the good connection again.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
plantear la pregunta a Borja. Sí, mientras esperamos que Eduardo recupere la buena conexión. De acuerdo, pues lo vamos a hacer de siguiente manera. Mientras Eduardo intente conectarse, a ver, vamos a probarlo por última vez. Eduardo, ¿estás dentro? Conecta el vídeo y micro. A ver si hay suerte y esta vez nos permite escucharte bien.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to go through this, but if I fail, I will connect through a different network. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. So I was saying that I will be sharing with you the status of the media in the Southern Africa region. What I want to bring to you now is a study that was done very recently that shows what is the status of the gender in the media. And this was done by Gender Links. It's an organization based here in Southern Africa, based in Johannesburg, but it's a regional organization of which until very recently, I was the executive director for Mozambique and Africa, and I conducted part of the study with researchers in Mozambique. If you can look at the graph here that shows what are the topics that are covered by the media in this region, you will see clearly that most of the major topics that are covered by the media are economics, social issues, sports, politics, and government. Those are the top topics in the media in the Southern Africa region as a general. Of course, there are small variations between countries, but the overall data reflects the reality in the whole of the Southern Africa region. And it's not wrong to say that this is also the reflection of the whole continent of Africa. And if you see the issues of sexual reproductive health, for instance, and gender equality are minimal. Gender equality topic appears as covered only at 1%. The sexual reproductive health topic, where we include the gender-based violence, it counts only for 2%. It has been like this since 2010, because this study has been done every 5 years. The Gender and Media Progress Study is being conducted every 5 years. The last one was in 2015, and the latest was the 2020 study. And before that, there was a study done in 2015. It shows very small progress in terms of gender issues in the media, and even less in terms of gender-based violence. If we look at the proportion of the sources of these stories, you will find out that in almost every topic, women are the least voices heard in the media. And this is where the biggest issue is when we talk about violation of human rights, because we consider that freedom of expression is one of the fundamental human rights. And when women are not given voice in the media, that by itself constitutes the violation of women's rights. You can see from this graph that in all the topics, men are the majority of the sources of the stories. Only on gender equality issues is where we see women speaking more than men. But even with this, we can find explanations as to why this is happening in Africa. Of course, we don't have much time to dwell into the history of our country or of our countries in Africa, but I can briefly say that this is a consequence of the new states after independencies where the media was mostly used as a propaganda instrument, where the creativity of journalists was not well regarded as the main goal of the journalists. Rather, it was expected from the journalists to replicate the political voices. So in that context, there was no need, there was no interest of being creative, of bringing all the voices to the media. That is why we still see that most of the news stories in the Southern Africa region are single-sourced. There are only one source in most of the stories that are published, either in the newspaper, radio, or television. And because gender is also enshrined in the politics, in the government, in the other services, where the leadership is mostly men, if you have a story that is only one sourcing, the likelihood of that source being a man is higher. That's why you will see that in almost all the topics, men are outnumbering women, and women only speak on a very limited roles and on very limited topics, such as the gender equality, a little bit on sexual reproductive health and rights. So this gives us the very clear indication of the status of the media in the region and in the continent. I'm saying in the continent, even though the data I'm showing here is from Southern Africa, but this is the reality also in the whole continent of Africa, where we still have gender inequalities in every areas. We have more male journalists, we have more male editors, we have more males in the decision-making positions of the media. That makes that it creates a situation where having less female journalists, it also increases the potential of having less issues that are of concern and interest of women in the media. When we look at the data I just presented to you, that brings the level of female voices to 22%, this means that 1 in every 5 news sources is a female. Even on the topics that affect mostly women, when we talk about gender equality, gender-based violence, sexual reproductive health, family planning, and so on, you still have less women speaking. The majority of news reporters, which is another reason for this scenario, for this status, is that 66% of reporters are men. And we only have women outnumbering men when it comes to presenters, either TV presenters or radio presenters. That is where you see a little bit of more women appearing in the media. Now, the stories of sexual reproductive health and rights, where we include gender-based violence, accounts only for 2% of all the media coverage. Only 2% of the total number of stories that have been monitored were related to sexual reproductive health and rights. This topic of sexual reproductive health and rights, as you can see, it is breakdown on many other subtopics. But the biggest number of stories on this particular topic is on gender-based violence, which counts for 50%, or 50% of all the stories on sexual reproductive health and rights. And remember, this 50% is just 50% of the 2% that is on sexual reproductive health and rights. Even on this topic, of sexual reproductive health and rights, where we include gender-based violence and other topics, we can see that male sources are higher than female sources. One would expect that, being this topic mostly related to women issues and so on, we will have more females speaking on this topic, but we still have male speaking on this topic. Because when journalists, when reporters approach sources for comments, they will either consult someone who is a leader in that particular sector, either minister or deputy minister or director of a hospital. And in most of this area, you will find that the leadership positions are occupied by men. No wonder we will continue to have such situation where we have more males speaking over female. On the topics of sexual reproductive health and rights, you will see also that almost in all the topics, when we break down sexual reproductive health and rights, we will see that in almost all the topics, male sources outnumber female sources. Only when it comes to menstrual health, that's where you have more female outnumbering male sources. And the explanation is clear. This is a particular issue that the experience of men is less relevant to give first accounts. Now, when we try to understand who produces the news in the newsrooms, in the media, as I said, we have more male reporters and we have less female reporters. And also the reason for this, we can explain why we have less male reporters, less female reporters and have more male reporters. This is, it comes from the tradition, the culture, where females in Africa have limited roles to play in the society. They are taken as people who are supposed to stay at home, to be mothers, to be wives. If they are to work, they are expected to work in very limited areas of work. And the media is not exactly what is expected for female to be engaged in, because it requires working overtime. Sometimes it requires traveling. Sometimes it requires interviewing men and traveling with men. And in most of our societies in Africa, they don't take this as an area where women should engage. We have been trying to do some effort with the university where I work in, with other organizations that are also concerned about this situation, to encourage female students, female professionals to stay in the newsroom, to stay in the media houses. But even in that situation, we have also other issues that makes them less willing to stay or remain in the media business. We can talk about sexual harassment. We can talk about flexibility of time for a female journalist to work at night, to work late at night. Sometimes she's breastfeeding. And if the media houses are not taking these particular needs of the female practitioner, then the choice that that practitioner will have is to leave the media house and find another job that is more suitable for the situation, for her own particular situation. So having more male journalists and less female journalists, and understanding the culture of Africa, where men see women as a less important human being, and the issues and concerns of females are also not taken as a priority in the media, we will continue to have less and less news stories, news articles related to the issues that concerns women. Gender-based violence is mostly affecting women. And if we have more male journalists, more male editors, more male head of the newsrooms, and they understand and they were raised thinking that female issues are not a priority for the society, they will continue to neglect the topic of gender equality, the topic of gender-based violence. They will continue to neglect the voices of women. They will continue to neglect everything that are of interest and of concern for the women. The only way we can change this scenario is to increase the participation of female in the media business, to increase the number of female reporters. We can see from this graph that there's a little bit of increase from the last study done in 2015 to the current one of 2020, a small increase of 3% of female reporters in the newsroom. That is a good sign. If we continue making this progress, then we can see the changes that are coming. When you have more female journalists in the newsroom, we can start changing the trend of how the topics are being covered in the media. We can see that female reporters, they tend to report on issue of gender equality. We can see that they tend to report on the issue of climate change and sustainable development. We can see the interest they have on health issues and so on. While the male journalists, they tend to report mostly on issues of sports, on issues of politics and government, the issue of peace and conflict, the issue of economics, the issue of electoral and political participation. So we can see from this graph and the previous one that I showed you that there is a direct link of having more female reporters and having the issues that concerns women, including gender-based violence, also increasing in the media. So there's a direct link we can see from this study that the more female reporters we have, the more issues that concerns women or the issues that are neglected by the news, the male-dominated newsroom, that can be changed. If we can make an effort to increase the number of female journalists or female reporters, then we can start seeing a change also on the increase on the number of topics, on the number of subjects that concerns women, particularly the issues on sexual reproductive health and rights, the issues of gender-based violence. To achieve that, here we can also see how the reporters, based on their gender, who they access more has their sources. We can see that the female sources have increased a little bit, in comparison with the male sources. Female reporters, they access more female sources, while male reporters, they access more male sources. So this tells us what I was mentioning on my previous slide, that if we can manage to increase the number of female reporters, then we can increase the number of topics that concerns women, issues that concern women's rights. And also we can increase the number of female sources, because this study shows us that Female reporters, they tend to access more female sources, while male reporters, they tend to access more male sources. And this is very important to understand because the media sector in Africa is largely dominated by male. And if men has a patriarchal society that it is Africa, that consider the issues of women, the issues of women's rights, not a priority, they will continue to be neglected. They will continue to be out of the media agenda because they don't consider those topics to be relevant to the society or to be a priority topic to the society. And the alternative for us to change that situation, that scenario, is to make effort into the policies of the media houses, where we make it a policy that either female or male reporter should make effort to access female as well as male sources equally. We should make effort also at the policy level of the media houses that female reporters should be given encouragement to cover all the topics, not only be assigned to particular topics such as education, health, and so on. Female reporters should also be given a chance to cover stories on politics, cover stories on sports, to cover stories on economics and other topics that are considered to be male, quote unquote. We also have to make effort that female journalists are protected from sexual harassment in order for them to remain in the media houses, to remain in the newsroom, because it is their presence in the newsroom that will be crucial to change the situation that we see today of less topics that are of women or women's rights, less voices of women, and that can only be attributed to the lack of female in the media houses, lack of female in the top position where the decisions are made, the lack of encouragement for the female reporters to remain in the office. Even when these topics are covered in the media houses, in the newsrooms in Africa, the way the issues of women's rights, particularly gender-based violence, is reported is of a sensationalization, where the media, instead of contributing to the eradication of gender-based violence, most of the time, the media just increase the suffering of those who have already gone through that painful experience. The survivors, most of the time, when the media report on particular story of gender-based violence, they present the survivors of gender-based violence in a way where they become the guilties. They are being persecuted over their own suffering. So the stories that the male journalists, I say male journalists because are the majority of the reporters in Africa, when they cover stories on women's rights, they do it in a very sensationalization way, where they bring more of the spectacle of the incident rather than the problem that has to be addressed and eliminated. They will report, for example, for instance, instead of reporting on the issue that is happening, they will focus on the way the survivor was dressed, the time that the incident happened, where then her history of drinking, the history of smoking, the history of dancing, in trying to show that the survivor was a victim of rape or any other domestic violence type because of her prior history, because of the time she was on the street, because of the place where she was at that particular point in time, instead of reporting on the issue, not on the particulars that surrounds the incident. And this is only happening because male journalists, they will always think that it is because of the dressing of that particular girl that she was raped. It was because she gave some indication that she wanted to be sexually assaulted, or she wanted to be sexually harassed. But when it's a female journalist reporting on the same stories, we see a difference in the approach. Female journalists will tend to bring in the issue of the rights, the issues of the equality, and they will refute the idea that the female was raped or the girl was raped, the girl was harassed because she asked for it. And this is the background I wanted to bring for this discussion. And I'm very glad and happy to say that some initiatives are taking place, particularly in Mozambique, where I am now. But in around also the region, there are initiatives taking place. In Mozambique, I can mention the latest initiative that Medicus Mundi, the office of Mozambique, took in conducting a series of training workshop for journalists, female and male journalists, on gender-based violence, on how to report on gender-based violence, in order to encourage both male and female journalists to report on gender-based violence responsibly, bringing in the issues of the human rights, the issues of public health, and the commitments, the international commitments that Mozambique has signed in the United Nations and in the region to eradicate gender-based violence. So these are some of the initiatives that some organizations, including Medicus Mundi, Mozambique, are taking to see if this current status can be changed in the next few years, where we can start seeing stories on women's rights also featuring in the media, as well as other issues that are being considered to be a priority, such as sports, economy, governance, and other topics. With that effort also, we're aiming to see that more female voices can start being heard in the media through these initiatives, where we encourage every journalist to access both male and female sources on a different range of capacities, not only as victims or survivors, but also as experts, as witness, as experts, and other roles. So this is what I wanted to bring to our discussion, and I will be very happy to receive questions when the debate time comes, to elucidate some more issues that my presentation may have raised. As I said, the data that I presented here was collected from the Gender Links 2020 Gender and Media Progress Study, a study that we do every 5 years in the Southern Africa region, but also collaborate with other African regions to check the status of gender and the media in the whole continent, and also we participate globally regularly to include the component of Africa in the global studies on gender and media. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo. Muchísimas gracias por tu presentación.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Haremos una breve pausa.
We are going to take a very brief pause, a very short break, but we will hear Stephen playing another song and a few minutes just for coffee or some water or a comfort break. And we will be back at 17:45. We have another presentation after that, and then we'll have our debate. So I insist once again, there are lots of questions. There aren't a lot of questions coming in. That's the good thing. We can talk, so I welcome all of the questions that you're sending, lots of suggestions, comments, and I'm happy to see that you're there listening and actively participating. Thank you. So we'll leave you with Stephen, and we'll be back at 17:45, 5:45.
Hello again. I'm going to play another piece by Enrique Granados. Before I do, I wanted to say a few things about Enrique Granados. He was a Catalan composer from the beginning of the 20th century, a pianist. These are transcriptions I've done for the guitar. Interesting enough, when he was young, at 14, 15 years old, his father died, and he had to help the family with finances. And he played around the area, sitting in here in Barcelona, playing piano at cafes to help money. He was he had a poetic sensibility. Pau Casals called him the poet of the piano. There's a nice anecdote that I will tell you about, is that one time he was playing at the piano, a student entered the room and asked him, "Maestro, what are you playing?" He said, "I'm playing," he looked out the window of the room he was in, "I'm playing those flowers, the garden, the blue and orange heavens of the sunset, the peace of the jasmines." It was this poetic sensibility that Granados has in his music. This is Danza Española, number 2, Oriental. Without further ado, thank you.
Gracias, Stephen. Bueno, nos despedimos de él. Después de una muy breve pausa, seguimos con una presentación muy interesante, movernos seguras en el entorno digital, el gran temazo. Nada, hasta las 15:45. Gracias. Hola de nuevo, desde la sala de Instituto Catalán de la Mujer de Barcelona, vosotros delante de de vuestros ordenadores, en casa o en donde sea.
Hello again, welcome back from the Institut Catalán de las Donas. Now we are going to have a debate that comes from Ecuador, which will be between Mónica Diego and Priscila Purchert Vaquerizo, who is the co-coordinator of Navegando Libres por la Red, which is surfing freely on the web. So this is about how to safely surf the digital environment. So we give you the floor. Okay, you can unmute and start. Hello, good afternoon. We hope all of you are well. I am Mónica Diego from the Workshop of Women's Communication, and this is my colleague Priscilla. She's going to talk as well. And I'm going to try to talk slowly. I would like to talk to you. I'm going to begin for about 5 minutes, and then my colleague will take over. And we're going to tell you about the situation in our country at this time. I'm speaking from Quito, Ecuador, and I would like to tell you that Ecuador, well, 5 minutes, what I'm going to talk to you about. Ecuador, since the year 2019 has been affected by a series of measures from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, that have shaken the economy of the country. And as you know, that led to very important protests with a 13-day shutdown in 2019. And that, together with all of the COVID-19 pandemic measures from early 2020, where we have had restrictions, educational, work-related, etc. So this has meant, most of all, with the pandemic, there has been an increase of the index of social economic inequality in our country. And it means that there are groups of the population that are very, very exposed and vulnerable to this crisis. And we have many workers that don't have a stable or sufficient employment, and many of them are involved in an informal economy. Since May of this year, Ecuador has had a new president, Guillermo Lasso, who's a banker, very conservative and neoliberal. He does not have a majority in the legislative assembly of the country, and at this moment, the country has about 70 billion as a deficit, and of the different steps taken by Lasso has been to vaccinate an important part of the population from May to the present, and they have begun to have the majority of the population vaccinated, but most of all in the large cities like Quito or Guayaquil. This, together with high levels of immigration and lack of safety. There are many children, for example, this year that have not been registered for school, and there are some serious measures that have to be taken for the coming months. Now, getting into the idea of gender-based violence and COVID, well, Ecuador, based on statistics from 2019, 6 of every 10 women almost have experienced some type of violence in the country. And all of this has been worsened during the pandemic, where the public ombudsman has expressed that there has been an increase in the number of calls for help from women because of domestic violence. And this is to understand the dimension of what happened, most of all, during the months of confinement. In the first 3 weeks that were between March and April, the ombudsman had 1,695 cases of domestic violence during confinement. And what is really of great concern is that the ECO 911, the integrated system of security from the 12th of March and the 11th of April had 6,800 calls from women because of domestic violence, and only 10% of those received any kind of a response. So these numbers, if there are 235 women called during that period to ask for help. This is the situation that we have in the country, and we are here. We are the workshop, Women's Communication Workshop. We are a lesbo feminist organization that's been working in the country. We have 3 lines: digital rights, the lesbo feminist information, and equality. Let us tell you about some of the things that we have achieved over these years. One of the most important things that we did and that we're still doing is the work for the incidence and demand in the face of lesbian women being sent to rehabilitation centers to cure them from their homosexuality. We've been working on this, and this has appeared both nationally, internationally, and through the political both national and international political pressure. We've been able to change laws and regulations, and in all of these this period, the state has had situation. This is not one of the strongest lines that we're having at this moment, but we know that women, we are working for lesbian women, and we know that men and transgender individuals are also being locked up in these centers, and we know that they continue to exist. And another one of our achievements has been analyzing the femicide in the country. Together with other organizations, we have been reporting since 2016 the cases of femicide in our country. This information is gathered through different systems. We have one of the 4 organizations that belong, the Mapeo Alliance. It is the homes for or shelters for battered women, and this we can see these figures from the council, the government councils, as well as private organizations. And from here on, we created maps and infography. We had a PowerPoint presentation. There we have a map. Thank you. Now, if you can. Okay, there it is. There we are. That's it. So this infograph of the femicide since 2016, every 2 months, it is published in all of the media, television, social media. And this year, since January, we until the 30th of June, we have 105 cases of femicides. And between the 1st of January 2014 and the 30th of June until now, we have 921 cases. All of this work, apart from civil society being much more aware of the term of femicide. Every time that we put this infographic out, the media call us, and the topic is discussed, and there's a conversation begun about this issue. The Ecuadorian state, since practically 2016, we have been at the tables of the Institute of Statistics. We have been at different institutional meetings in order to try to standardize this data, because there was different data being given to the civil society, and Ecuador has since 2014 in its penal code the term of femicide. We call it feminicide, but femicide is the correct word. This has included trans femicides and sicariat, because most of all in 2021, the sicariats towards women, well, there's a debate whether these are femicides or not, but this has made us consider this, and this infograph that I'm not seeing now, there are 33 sicariats versus women, against women in our country. I will give the floor now to Priscilla in the third line. She's going to talk to us about the digital rights, which is the third one, the last one that we began to work with. She's going to talk to us more about the prevention of gender-based violence. Thank you very much, Monica. Can I please see the presentation? Well, our program is part of Women's Communication Workshop. It's a feminist organization that has a history of 30 years in our country. And surfing freely on the web comes from Quito, but we work with women in other regions and we give virtual support at a national level as well. Now, surfing freely in 2016 in order to accompany and mitigate the gender-based violence on the web. That is what we were trying to do. Any kind of harassment, abuse, aggression, violence that comes through the use of social network within the technologies of information and communication. Our work has revealed that this type of violence affects mostly women, girls, adolescents, and people from the LGBTIQ environment. And they always take place in situations of social inequality. So the gender-based violence doesn't come apart from the other types of violence that there are, but they are usually related or mixed. In this sense, and in order to promote the digital rights of women, girls, and those from the LGBTIQ, we do mainly three things. On the one hand, we work in the production of knowledge concerning digital rights. We create tools for disseminating information about the prevention of violence. We do it through our social media and on the web, and we accompany people, women that have suffered from this kind of digital violence, digital gender-based violence. In April of 2020, we had our first diagnosis of the country, thinking of the importance and the impact of identifying and naming this violence so that it could become more visible, but also to support what the victims of this type of violence have been experiencing. The idea was not just to reveal it, the violence that is present on internet and point it out, but also to show that this is a continuation of the gender-based violence that we have in other settings. The research that we did was to try to look for the precedents so that we can establish measures both on a personal level as well as public actions. And what we wanted to do was not just show that it exists, but at the same time to provide a response. Now, part of this diagnosis was to carry out analysis of the media that have the greatest presence in our country, to talk about the role that they were having in reproducing this type of violence. And what we were able to find, here it is, by monitoring the media and national and local newspapers that are read widely, we saw that in the context of Ecuador, there is not an efficient communication based on the stereotypes of gender. There is no attempt to counteract the normalization of this gender-based violence, and there are almost no contents in this sense, and they do not inform extensively about the violence that takes place. If they mention it, it is just in passing, as if they were just details rather being the center of the problem. And the discourses that are created do not usually have a gender approach. And we can also say that through the platforms of these same media entities, through their websites, etc., there was no talk of this. So it was allowed for their false news to be broadcast or to be disseminated, and so we saw how there was a lack here. And what we wanted to highlight and what we considered important to bring to the forefront in this seminar, this meeting, is that we believe, as we've heard from other panelists in the previous presentations today, is that the media, the mass media, has the responsibility of providing information because they affect the collective imaginary. They also have an impact on social behavior. So these media can strengthen the patriarchal system to legitimize it, but at the same time, they could promote, questions and ideas. We believe that the media have the ability of disassembling or dismembering some of these ideas that have been around for so long, to present the idea of other models, to make the gender-based violence a topic that is visible, and also from an approach that has to do with prevention and from the human rights standpoint. Now, to tell you about the work that we do, which is basically to carry out a feminist accompaniment in the case of gender violence, we would like to tell you how we understand this accompaniment, what we believe it should be, and how we carry it out. For us, it is a process of a response in the digital area that allows people that have survived this type of activity to give them justice and support in the community. We want to provide them with safety, with care, and we try not to re-victimize them, but rather to support the development of their capacities. We believe that accompaniment is a channel for being able to express our right to live without violence, and surfing freely has to do with the historic work that has been done by our colleagues in other cases. When we talk about feminist accompaniment, we're talking about a shared exercise of establishing strategies that allow us to get out of these situations of violence, or at least know how to react to them. And we try to improve the capacities of those that participate, putting their needs at the center. And this is done through the construction of safe spaces of empathy that try to create networks of support and resources so that they can reach their goals. In summary, the accompaniment, what it does is to help these individuals to feel that they are supported, and often they turn to state resources or legal resources, but our accompaniment in and of itself does not depend on the response or the help that they can have, but it comes as a response in the face of the lack of effectiveness of the state. Well, in general, who do we accompany? Well, the people or the groups that have been victims of digital aggressions, but specifically women, girls, people from the LGBTIQ collective, feminist organizations, and organizations that defend the rights of women. Now, our accompaniment more or less are carried out in 5 stages. Once we receive the request for accompaniment through our safe email, we have a reception, we establish strategies, and that, of course, is more complicated now. We have to do it virtually because of COVID and other situations. And once we have brought together all of these details about the aggression, and once we know what the needs are of the survivors, then we do an analysis of the risk that is always going to be accompanied by the documentation related to the case. We have a database where we register everything that we receive as well as the accompaniment that we carried out in order to later analyze and better understand how they are operating. Once we meet with the person being accompanied, we look at the strategies for actions, we look at the alternatives that are available to us, and regardless of what we agree there, we always start up some strategies of digital protection that are very basic, that we believe everyone should take into account. And from that point on, we carry out the follow-up that we think is adequate. If necessary, we help them to implement the strategies, and in some cases, we have to refer them to other organizations that can help them with the psychological or the legal aspects of the situation. And if we think that there's been a satisfactory result, then we close the case of accompaniment. However, they can always come back to us if there's a new incident. Finally, we have a phase of feedback and evaluation. And the team of people that do the accompanying are able to analyze and see how things have gone and take any steps that will allow us to improve and to do our work better. We are involved in a role of self-criticism, and the important thing is that we constantly evaluate the situations that we know. Currently, we identify digital harassment, non-sexual, digital sexual violence, doxing, the hate speech and discriminatory expression, attacks on freedom of speech, access, not non-authorized access to accounts and servers, or attacks on children and adolescents. We believe that all of this has an impact on people's lives in a very immediate way. What is virtual actually is real. And even though in this session we're not going to go into depth in the impact of COVID-19, we would like to mention that, as is the case in other areas, this pandemic has highlighted some vulnerabilities that perhaps were not seen before. It has revealed how the hyperconnectivity affects the social relationships, and it also has shown the digital divide that exists, the gender digital divide. Girls that cannot have access to education, or adolescents because they don't have the necessary resources for that, or because the area where they reside does not have the necessary infrastructure to be able to work or communicate, etc. We have seen that digital gender violence has not been treated with the necessary attention, and especially because COVID-19 has become the pandemic in the period of information and communication technology information. So this is a situation that we had before coronavirus, but what has happened during this period is it has magnified the situation. Between the 11th of March of 2020, which is when the health emergency from the pandemic was declared, and the 31st of August of 2021, we registered 88 cases of digital violence, digital gender violence, and we can say that the acts of violence affect most LGBTIQ, women and children, is the sexual digital gender-based violence. We identified grooming, exploitation based on technology, and the extortion of a sexual nature. Now, in the case of, we were able to see that it was necessary to continue with our research in order to generate tools to make all of this more visible, to prevent it and to mitigate it. We are here and we have been able to create Surfing Freely. It's thanks to the feminist activism that we have had from the mid-decade of 2000, and it has initiated and has been creating this pressure on states, on internet platforms, in order to generate advances in this area and resistance, etc. One of the main reasons why this has been a slow process has to do, on the one hand, with how this violence has become something natural, both on the side of the victims, the society, institutions, platforms. And this is something that has been in detriment to our work, but we know that we have to continue working in order to continue building this on our own. We believe that we are not just users of the internet, but also we can also help with these expectations by creating our own rules. And there's something that we like very much, and it's that it's not necessary for there to be more women that are programmers, but rather we need more cross-cutting feminism, from how they're built, how they're used, what means they're used for, and all of that.
Righty, our sort of objective goal that we want to reach is basically continue to promoting LGBTIQ plus the community right in the digital world, because we understand we cannot accept any sort of gender violence without digital tools. And what we actually need is a specific proposals as to what sort of technology we want to create. On the other hand, we also would like to contribute towards the feminist imaginary, which requires actually, on the one hand, recognize and eradicate any form of male violence online, which would allow us to dream of different spaces which do not perpetuate these male chauvinist forms of violence. We want to help through studying the sort of mechanisms of this different nature of violence, and always searching for support networks and allies so that we can respond to the needs of people requesting to be supported, to be cared for. We're constantly looking for financial means so that we can still offer free of charge service for our members. And in order to sum up, I'd like to finish with this reflection. For us, observing with a critical side, the sort of aggressions that happen in human interactions have the mobilizing component, which implies to recognize yourself as a victim, to consider survivors and build the necessary conditions towards the transformation and eradication of any form of violence. This is so far our presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Monica and Priscilla. And with this last speech, we've finished with today's presentations. So now we shall open our Q&A session, our debate. And well, I will try to answer as a sort of first come, first serve order. The very first question then should be for Jordi. Marta from Barcelona asks you, do you think that the cooperation policies currently put in place by the Barcelona City Council, actually focusing on gender issues, will still be implemented irrespectively of the political party ruling the city? Well, I cannot foresee the future, but it's true And I believe this is a constant not only in cooperation or for development, but in our city, we have this tradition to work at the long term, to establish long-sighted plans. It's true that it's hard these days to reach consensus, but Barcelona is a great forum where many things can actually be debated and agreed on. It's not a fashion. This has come to stay. It'd be really difficult to imagine a big change. Obviously, there will be nuances, but I cannot imagine seeing a radical change. Probably we will actually deepen because every day we're learning more and more. We've established the first gender justice plan. We're drafting the second one and probably will sign and define more. So that actually reflects on our way of thinking. As I say, it's here to stay. Thank you, Jordi. Another question for you, this time from Bilbao's City Council. This lady says, you talked about your projects being implemented in different countries, and you also mentioned projects from different NGOs. How do you design these projects? Where do your ideas and initiatives come from? Well, generally speaking, our programs and direct cooperation projects actually come from city-to-city agreements. Previously, we did many brotherhood or alliances between towns and cities, but we have cooperation protocols directly from cities. It's a horizontal way of one-to-one working. We're looking for this mobilization, this direct form of cooperation. Its main advantage is using the knowledge, experience, the expertise, the plans, protocols, know-how from each city council. So normally this happens thanks to political agreements, MOUs and cooperation programs that we signed with our own resources, but also with Barcelona City Council ones, and also the city networks, SCGLU, FIDEO, or Mediterranean cities. All these sort of fora are brilliant to foster this sort of direct cooperation. In this case, the less important thing is the financial funds. Actually, the most important one being the human resource capability. So let's say then they are meant to last for a long time. They're not short, specific or isolated projects. So we understand that they have a certain continuation. Yes, exactly. We exchange technical knowledge. It's a sort of umbrella situation that lasts several years because these agreements are signed for 3-4 years, and it's the way for us to mobilize, to get things happening. In Barcelona also, people working in civil servants travel actually to other places, and managing to, the articulation of all these internal structure to be able to carry on these activities, it's quite hard work. Thank you, Jordi. Let's now go for Borka's questions. Maria Cobos says, excellent work, Borka. As a journalist, do you feel that the Bosnian society and Bosnia-Herzegovina society is really polarized when it comes to gender violence? In Spain, we witness that some populist political parties and some radical sort of media are actually being too radical or have a wrong position with regards to gender issues. Could you switch your mic on, Borka?
Yes. Did you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Adelante.
Yes, I wrote my answer, but I have some information from Bosnia and Herzegovina related to the radicalization situation in the country. We have a polarized society. during the war, after the war, at the moment. From my perspective, the situation is the most better now than before 10 or 15 years. We have the processes who support gender-based violence in offline and in online space. Especially in small towns in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have reunion, patriarchate and traditional approach to educate women, girls, and we also some cases to stop educate female children. It's the problem for our society that we have no common approach to the decrease gender-based violence and different opportunity for the male or female. We have two parallel systems in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska too. And we have some institutions on cantonal level, entities and state levels. We have no common strategy for all administrative levels in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The positive things is that we have very strong civil society organization. We have very strong female civil society organization and defenders of the female human rights. And I think that we, in the group of civil society organization, have only space for the decreased radicalization movements in Bosnia, and also to decrease violence against women, against young girls, against all prominent women who are active in the public space. I think that the NGOs which are focused to the female rights, human rights, are the space for new paradigm to solve the problem with domestic violence, gender-based violence, presentations, these kind of violence in the Bosnian public space, and also it's the space to create new paradigm and improvement in legislation for totally protection victim of the gender-based violence. Also, I would like to point that we have also some good examples, cross-sectoral cooperation among civil society organizations, academia and government institutions. Especially in Canton Sarajevo, we open with our colleagues from Foundation of Local Democracy dialogue with the government of Canton Sarajevo, and also with different ministries and other public institutions to cooperate with civil society organization, media and academia to promote fight with the gender-based violence. And finally, I think that we have opportunity to develop completely new syllabus at the faculties of law or faculties of journalism to include the topic of gender-based violence, legal protection of the victim of gender-based violence, to report within media about that topic. We are in the contact with the professors from Faculty of Political Science in Sarajevo, and we open dialogue to change their syllabus and put some lectures, some seminars within syllabus titled Ethic of Journalism, and prepare some modules to educate journalists of students of journalism related to the topic. When they started to be part of the media outlet, they will have knowledge and skills to report about gender-based violence, violence of different faith.
Gracias, Borka. Seguimos con la segunda.
Thank you, Borka. Let's carry on with the second question for you. This one comes from Victoria Falco, who's responsible for communication of the NGO called Interreg, who says that on the 7th of October, they will be introducing their report to the Madrid media called Issues Related with Climate Change, COVID, and Gender Violence. So congratulations for all these wonderful projects, and thank you for these fruitful presentations. I was wondering how men journalists in media houses, are they actually promoting and are they part of these campaigns, I wonder?
No te escuchamos, te tienes que abrir el micro, por favor.
Yeah. Yes, yes, we have our male colleagues in our activities all the time. We have no 50 and 50 number of men and female in our activities, but around 30% of our colleagues, men from media and from our association are very active in our activities. You can see some reports on our webpage, and you can see a lot of men and our colleagues with us on the conferences, on the promotional activity. They are writing some articles about gender-based violence, gender equality, and we have very good, very educated men in our steering committee and association, and they are very active in protecting me and my colleagues when we were the victim of different kind gender-based violence. We have some reports about gender-based violence and activity by steering committee of my association and activity of media outlet, and you can see facts that I explain.
Thanks, Borka. Hvala, Borka. Seguiríamos con la pregunta para Dr. Eduardo Namburete. Susana,
we shall continue with a question for Mr. Namburete. The creativity of journalism currently, do you believe that it depends on who is financing the media? Do we truly have freedom of speech amongst professionals in order to write about women's rights? Mr. Namburete, whenever you wish, you have the floor. You can switch on your camera too. Please.
Okay. Well, the question, if I understood it clearly, they're asking whether it's true that there is a freedom of expression among the journalists to report on the issues of gender-based violence. My video was stopped, I think, on that side, so I will keep on talking without the video. Yes. The question will be two-folded. I will say yes, I will say no, but the no is not an official no, because there's no prescription that a reporter should not report on gender-based violence or gender issues. But what is lacking is the conscious action from the leadership in the newsrooms. As I said, the media sector, I believe everywhere, but I will speak on Africa, is mainly dominated. And journalists, as well as editors, are part of the society. And this society where we live in Africa is deeply ingrained in this patriarchal culture, if I can say, where women and women's issues are seen as of less regard. So the leadership, if they are not aware of the importance of bringing gender issues into their news papers or news reports for radio and television, they will not put those issues on the agenda. How can we then address that weakness, which I consider weakness, because neglecting issues of a very important portion of the society, women in Africa make more than 50%. So ignoring the issues that concern more than 50% of the population, it's not an issue that has to do with the culture. It's lack of professionalism. Ignoring the voices of the majority of the population in the continent, that is not a cultural issue, is lack of professionalism. The way I see how we can address this is that the media houses, they need to deliberate to have their internal policies, internal gender policies, in their editorial policies. They make clear deliberations how they should approach the issues of sourcing, the issues of setting the agenda, and instruct their own journalists, their own reporters to follow such policies. If a newspaper can deliberate that we will not accept a story to be published without 2 or more sources, and one of those sources should be female, this by itself, it will change the figures that I presented. If the media houses can establish in their own policy that they would not tolerate sexual harassment, then female journalists will not face sexual harassment in the newsroom. That by itself, it will help female journalists to remain in the newsroom, to remain in the media business. If the media houses can deliberate in their internal policies that among all the topics, gender-based violence or other gender issues or women's rights issues should feature in their newspaper, in their radio and television program, that by itself will force everyone working in media house to seek stories that covers the women's rights issues, gender-based violence, sexual reproductive health and rights. Because there's no such policies, this is left to each professional in the media house to decide what to report on, what to cover, and how to do it. And because most of them are male and they have no particular interest on female issues, this is why we end up having such numbers of low numbers of stories related to women's issues, related to gender-based violence. So I would say there is freedom because there's nothing written that journalists should not report on gender-based violence. But because of this culture that is ingrained in every part of our society, that takes women's issue as of less important, and in the lack of clear policies, deliberate policies in the media houses, it makes this topic always neglected by all the journalists. The editors themselves, they are also part of the society. So we cannot expect that just because they're editors, they're better informed about women's rights, about gender issues, about gender equality, and so on. There's a need of training for everyone who is involved in the media production. There's a need of encouragement for the female journalists to continue their struggle working in the media house and media-dominated environment. There's a need to establish clear policies on how the media can contribute to gender equality and stop this this bias towards women, to stop this denial of giving voices to women. We should work towards having an equitable distribution of space and time in the media to both women and men. So for me, the space is there. There is freedom, but we need to deliberate on those issues and establish clear policies in each media house so that this will not be something that is done based on the willingness of each reporter in the newsroom, but it should be following a clear policies that is established in the media house. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Eduardo. Nos gustaría
Thank you
seguir.
very much, Eduardo. We would like to continue with questions. We have quite a few, but time is going to limit us. We are going to look at the questions that have come for the delegation of Ecuador. From Maputo, we have a question that says, I would like to know if you have an experience that you can share with us about legal support, legal aid with this type of situation in the digital setting. How do you offer legal support? Do you have mechanisms in this sense? So, Monica. Hello, we're here. Yes, can you hear us? Very well. To answer our colleague from Maputo, we are a very small team. Therefore, as Priscilla said before, we don't have any legal support. What we do is we refer these victims to partners, to colleagues that we have from an NGO of feminist lawyers. And if there's a very serious case, they help us, because in both groups we're very small, so we have to refer cases to them. As far as psychological support is concerned, we are doing, well, we have commitments because we don't have psychologists in our organization either. We have studies from the universities. They're not studies, they are, well, there are small like offices that can provide orientation. So we refer them, victims, to that. So we accompany them, but it's not legal or psychological, but we try not to leave anyone without the care they need, and we try to find a way for these people to have them. As far as the question concerning laws, in August, Ecuador passed a law that has changed the situation of some gender-based violence crimes, and it's included in the law of violence against women. So we have to see how this is implemented, but there's been a debate, and I believe that many of the crimes of gender-based violence are not completely understood, and we have to see what response the government is going to give to the situation of gender-based violence, to define what it is even. And I hope in the coming months, hopefully not years, the state will be able to train their justice workers, and us as well, in some of these areas. Would you like to add anything to that? No. Okay, thank you, Bilanca. Thank you, Monica. The next question is from Catalina Arrobo from Ecuador. The topics dealt with yesterday and today are very important and necessary for finding actions that will try to bring about equality from the media. Thank you, Catalina. Our question has to do with knowing how we could reach a true freedom of expression that would be inclusive and not sexist, that it would be egalitary concerning what happens to women without stereotypes or distortions. And for the colleagues from the Women's Communication Workshop, how can we accompany adolescents and children or girls in the prevention of digital gender-based violence? So either one of you, please. Yes, sorry, I thought that the first one wasn't for us. So they're both for us, both of the questions? Yes, both questions are for you. And I believe that you can answer. Well, the first question that we all consider, no one has a response, and of course, none of us has a magic wand to having this freedom of expression that's non-sexist, that's egalitarian. I mean, that's what we're talking about during this entire workshop. I think the question that they're asking is, how can we accompany adolescents and girls in that? Perhaps that's the question that would probably be most interesting for you to answer. Yes, thank you very much for the question. We have accompanied some cases that have come to us, cases of children and adolescents, and we have found that it's a responsibility of the parents and of schools as well, but it has to do, at least in the last year with the pandemic, many of the things that were done offline have now gone online in a very accelerated way. And there was a lack of preparation in schools and on the part of the parents as well. In other words, they were not able to really analyze and evaluate the risks of these things. So we want to begin to work directly with schools and universities in order to carry out workshops for teachers, prevention workshops, or at least workshops that will allow them to identify the digital gender-based violence that is taking place towards children and adolescents, and for them to be able to have more effective responses to this. The problem is that it takes a long time for them to realize that these things are happening because they're not always that visible. So in general, we work with the parents when we're talking about very young children. In the case of adolescents, it's usually the adolescents that contact us directly, but we do insist on the need of them creating support networks with their parents, especially in sexual aggression. And this is a very taboo topic, so it's difficult, and they think that there might be, they might get in trouble with their parents, and we try to inform the parents, especially the mothers, that are very important in this process of accompanying. And they are always going to be a different support than what we can offer, and it's very important. So we are working on this and also developing prevention campaigns. The cases that come to us most are, for example, sextortion or putting up images without permission, sexual images without permission. So we have a campaign called Safe Sexting. We believe that that's it's a right of the adolescents, but because it's a taboo subject, they don't know what to do when a problem arises and what happens. We are saying, okay, you can do it, but be protected when you do it, know how to do it. And that's how we've been working so far with the cases that have come up as a result of the pandemic as well. Thank you very much, Priscilla. Okay, with this question, and with 15 minutes remaining until our time to finish at 7 o'clock, and in order to respect our program, and we're going to get to the final point, which is the conclusions and closure, before giving the floor to Ivan for him to summarize, what has been said so far. As the coordinator, I would like to thank all of the speakers, all of those listening, to Ana Garcia, Stephen Marquionda, that have given us the artistic aspect of this topic, which is a difficult one. Our hosts from the Instituto Català de la Dona and from Medicos Mundi that make it possible for us to do this for a third consecutive year. Ivan, Frances, Consuelo, and more of the external coverers, the graphic designer, the creators of videos, interpreters, to the technical staff. And I want to offer, wish you all a good Mercè holiday here in Barcelona. Thank you. And I give the floor to Ivan to give us the conclusions. Well, thank you very much. I am going to just give you an overview of the topics that we have been discussing and some of the statements that I've been writing down in the last couple of days that summarize some of the issues that we have discussed. Others will, it's been 6 hours, so I've only had 15 minutes to summarize it, so we may leave some things out. We've had debate, discussion, and presentations and guests from our closest reality here in Barcelona and Catalonia, and also our colleagues
América Latina,
organizations. Milanka, your participation. So one of the conclusions, the important conclusions, is how pertinent this situation is. In one way or another, we reached this topic thanks to the collaborations that we have in Bosnia, and specifically with the Association of Journalists, with the organization that coordinates Burka. And it seemed to us not only pertinent, but also absolutely interesting. I would say more even fascinating because of the power that the media has, and specifically in the area of violence. During this seminar, we have talked about the fact that media creates opinion, and we've talked about how the information that often reaches us from newspapers or television news, how it affects us, and it often highlights that inequality that we see all across the planet. The presentation that we had yesterday from Alicia, I think it was made very clear the power of marketing, the power that marketing has and advertising in creating these stereotypes that later need to be deconstructed. At the same time, another issue that has come up in several presentations from the power of the media is the political will to somehow provide a control to this information that in the end turns out to be harmful and can promote violence. That political violence has to do with regulations. We have heard several speakers from Bosnia, or also, as we heard from Dr. Eduardo from Maputo, the absence that there is in some African contexts that make it impossible for the media to be a vector that conveys ideas that are more respectful and less violent. That political will comes from the networks and the contact between the associations and civil society, and I think in conferences such as this and the work that we do at Medicos wherever we are present. Another of the conclusions that are important and that I have written down here is the disparity that there is, because when we talk about violence, we have expressed that it's a global problem. It's a global issue that affects many aspects of life, from economic to psychological, including public health. And it adds to inequality, and we can see that the levels of the way this information is dealt with in the media is very different from one place in the world to another. In Africa, as Dr. Eduardo said, it's necessary to include, well, to have a view of from women, a women's point of view of information. And in other places, not only do they have the participation of women in the media, but there still is a need to work a great deal in that participation in creating this collective imaginary based on equality, or from the perspective of equality. Another conclusions that I have written down is how it is, well, I don't know what to call it, but it's very fascinating to see how violence and inequality finds a way to get into every area of our lives. We are totally immersed in the digital world today, and violence has a very powerful position, a very powerful place in that setting, that digital setting, and that affects everyone, just as the power that advertising has, the more conventional advertising that we're used to, as we saw yesterday, and now the number of inputs that reach us through the social networks and the digital world is much greater. This violence comes quickly, and the administrations are always a step behind in regulating and controlling this, and it has, well, it affects our young boys and girls, and it is an issue for the future. Getting back to the start of these conclusions, the influence of this is so important because we have to continue giving importance to this debate, because what we sow now, we will reap in the future. And it's very important to insist on the ethics and the professionalism of the media and of all those that have a place on the web, on internet, whether we're doing marketing or we are promoting something. The conclusions, more qualitative conclusions, and here I'm speaking on behalf more of Medicus Mundi, is this total satisfaction that these are the third, this is the third meeting that we're having, the third seminar, the third workshop, and it always comes as a result from the work that we have done on the ground with our colleagues, both men and women, all over the world, wherever we are present, and this has also promoted interest. And in this case, we have, we must thank Milanka for bringing us voices that are not just from the sector of the NGOs and cooperation. From cooperation from NGOs, we do many things well, but there are things we only do so-so, as in any sector. And perhaps we often take advantage of that which surrounds us, but there are many people convinced that participate in these events that the important thing is to reach those that in reality have not had that much information, or they're just not familiar with the topic. We have made an effort. This is something that we prioritize a great deal lately, to bring people from the media, like Inma from La Vanguardia, or people from TV3, or people from the world of arts, so that that voice, perhaps a voice that is closer, well, will allow us to pass on the message. I think it's a lesson that we have learned, and in this time where we are all glued to the screen, and it's very difficult to catch people's attention. So we need to use these resources. This gives us oxygen, it gives us a boost, and it allows us to reach people that usually we don't reach. So that is an experience not just to be placed at the service of this event, but also what each and every one of us can do in our work on a day-to-day basis. And another conclusion is perhaps to close the bravery that we have to identify in the professionals in the world of communication, the media, in the times in which we live. They are exposed because their work is for the public, and some people use that to harm others. So we have to send all our support and a great big hug to Borka Rudic, that recently has suffered that harassment, as others of us have experienced in other situations. And it truly is a very unpleasant and negative situation. But those professionals that are willing to fight in favor of equality, they are the ones that are exposed to this type of critics. So, Silva, from here, this proximity, even if it's digital, that perhaps in Sarajevo we can meet one day. I wanted to thank her for her work with the press, and please don't stop doing it despite those that are attacking her. I would like to thank the entire team, to the people that are here, the technicians, thank Jordi from the City Hall, Barcelona, that has been with us, who's accompanied us, the people from the Catalan agency, the Institut Català de las Dones. Next year, we will do this again, and we would like to have all of you with us, and we will begin from, well, we're going to start as of today, what issues that we can all choose for our next event, so that it can be the theme of the next edition. And so far, we've come up to this point, and thank you all very much. Thank you, Ivan. I don't know, Jordi, if you would like to add anything. Well, very quickly, just thank you all, thank Ivan and all of you for this event. And we're already going to get started to work on the next one. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone, and good afternoon, good night, or good morning for those that are in Ecuador, and those that are from Barcelona. Have a great Mercè. It's the local patron, and it's a holiday, one of the biggest festivals that we have, and we'll see you soon, we hope. Thank you.